Media Kumwembe. This time it is as in program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And coming up in the program today, we look at prospects of the mining industry as the next big thing for the Malawi economy as stakeholders discuss the future. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome. In our main story in the program today, in Malawi, mining has been perceived as the next big thing, albeit less activities in the industry. To make a fortune out of the sector, the government said it was committed to reviewing, strengthening and enforcing of mining laws and regulations. Its contribution to the country's gross domestic product registered no growth, stagnant at 0.7% in the past 5 years. But the government plans to increase this contribution to GDP to 10% in line with provisions of the Malawi 2063, the country's long-term development blueprint. What could be done? Stakeholders have been engaging in a two-day mining investment forum, which started on Tuesday in Lilongwe to address this and other questions. Our Lilongwe-based business journalist, Taonga Sabola, witnessed opening of the Indawa and now reports.
For a very long time, Malawians have been told that the mining sector has the potential to transform the country's economy. However, years have passed without the potential being actualized. As such, the contribution of mining to the country's GDP has remained subdued. The contribution of mining to the country's GDP went up in 2009 up to 2014 when the Kairekera mine in Karonga was abruptly put under care and maintenance. Since then, very little has been heard about mining, but Lotus Resources Managing Director Keith Boyes said his company is ready to restart the Kairekera mine.
Lotus Resources is an Australian company. We're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and we own 85% of Lotus Africa Limited, which is the company that holds the mining license for Kairekera. The government of Malawi owns the other 15% of Lotus Africa Limited and therefore is a part owner of the project. So at the moment, I think one of the key things that we were waiting for as a company before we were able to make the decision about restarting the mine was the uranium price. So the uranium price has been very, very cyclical over the last 10 years or 15 years. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why the mine shut down back in 2014 was because the uranium price got too low. It got down to about $28 per pound and the mine wasn't economic. So the previous owners put the mine on care and maintenance, and Lotus has acquired the project back in 2020. And we've been waiting for the uranium price to come back up again. It has now reached a level where it makes sense for us to turn the mine back on. It's at around $90 per pound at the moment. So we're happy from a price perspective. But what we need to do is we need to go out and raise the money within the public markets or within the capital markets to fund the restart. And we need about $150 million to be able to do that. But the only way we can raise the money in the public market is by making sure we have the mine development agreement agreed to between ourselves and the government. And that's where we are at the moment. We've been negotiating this mine development agreement. We need to have that in place before we can actually raise the money and start the mine.
Agatswiri Holding Limited chairperson Hilton Banda lamented the weak participation of Malawians in the mining investment.
The main challenge which we're facing in Malawi is Malawian participation in terms of this investment. Because we may understand that these are huge investment, and most of the investors for these projects are outside the country, in London, in Australia. So we would like the government to put initiative that will allow Malawians to invest in this project. In so doing, we are going to participate and ownership. We are going to contribute to the ownership of this project. For example, if 5,000 Malawians contribute up to maybe 50,000, and that means obviously maybe we can have 60% shareholding in this project. And most of this project, the money which they are using to develop, they are raised on the stock exchange. That means it's a funds that is raised in small bits. that is opportunity for Malawians to do the same. So rather than leaving for the government only to take a free share, which is only maybe 10% or 15%, that is why we are losing quite a lot in terms of this mining project. So I would urge the government to put initiative that will allow local Malawians or company to buy shares in these big mining projects.
African Mineral Strategy Group Secretary General Moses Engadu said Africa must invest in knowing how much and where the minerals lie. According to Engadu, Africa must stop exporting raw materials.
Must not fold when faced with pressure, threats, and unfortunately sometimes blackmail. We must collectively say that no minerals must leave our borders without adding value. Your Excellency, we don't have to kid. Right now, we don't know how to make propellers, engines, but at least the primary value addition should be done here. Why must people even carry the soil? We got to learn in mineralogy that some of the minerals, like tin, the byproducts are lithium. So while they take this, they're taking 2 for 1. So we must state clearly as a continent that no more, never again must we export raw materials. I promise that with great certainty, if we do not waver, we shall win, our people will benefit, our nations will be transformed, and our continent will prosper.
It is the wish of every Malawian to see the mining sector contributing a lot to the country's GDP.
Malawi continues to spend beyond its means in recent years, witnessed by the ever-rising budget deficits. Consequently, the government continues to borrow heavily to finance its operations. In the 2024-2025 financial year, for instance, budget deficit is projected at about 1.4 trillion kwacha. Now, Malawi and Mauritius have been mentioned as two sub-Saharan countries expected to have their fiscal deficit widening further in 2024. This is contained in the African Purse, a latest publication by the World Bank titled Tackling Inequalities to Revitalize Growth and Alleviate Poverty in Africa. Kumwembe Mangazi has a story.
The publication notes that fiscal performance across African countries is expected to be heterogeneous this year. It says there are expected deficit widens in Malawi and Mauritius, while in Lesotho, the country will move from a surplus to a deficit. This is coming at a time Malawi is implementing the 2024-2025 national budget pegged at 5.9 trillion kwacha. The budget has a 1.43 trillion kwacha deficit. Economics Association of Malawi President Betha Chikadza says already the budget faces pressure from the effects of El Nino.
The World Bank is right because, as you can see, that's a budget that was probably formulated earlier this year, and we already have, a 1.5 trillion deficit. But we still have a problem with to take out 1.5 trillion. We know that we still need a lot of money, to finance the budget, and because of that, the government will still resort to borrowing. And on top of that, the country has been experiencing a lot of economic problems. We had floods, we had cyclones, we had all these other problems, and the El Nino that reduced food production. And so the government, in one way, it has to come in, and that's providing safety nets for those who have been affected. And because of that, it means that it has to continue, spending more just to finance all these other things which were already or initially not budgeted for. So because of that, we expect the deficit to actually widen. And on top of that, there are some issues, especially understanding that next year is a year of elections. So automatically the government will be in overdrive. spending more just to entice its voters. So obviously we expect, a lot of spending from the government, and that will widen the deficit. There's nothing much that can be done other than just widening the tax base, because even though we have a target and we see MRIA, touting that they have beaten the target that they were given, but as a country, we really need more just to finance the budget that we have. So it means that if we are borrowing, then the resources are not enough. So we need to finance more by actually widening the tax base, introducing other things that we are not being taxed, but taxing other things that were not initially taxed, or they were taxed, but we stopped somewhere. I always talk about, issues of housing. There can be a levy that people can be paying in terms of housing, in terms of refuse disposal, in terms of so many things, and in such a way that we can widen the tax base and get a lot of revenue. But also, take into consideration that there is credit squeeze in so many developing countries. I think the developed countries should just come in and also help in terms of budget finance.
Secretary to the Treasury Bechani Chereni said earlier that the government succeeded in narrowing the budget deficit from 1.645 trillion kwacha, in line with the set ambitious goal of addressing budget mismatches.
The good thing is that we are doing two things which are quite important. Number one is that we are rationalizing our revenue collection, and number two is that we are looking at issues of exports as well. But also, not just that, even in terms of exports, we are focusing on production. We're not focusing on, ORT. If you look at the budget that we have just produced, we're saying that yes, there's a deficit, but we have taken down that deficit to 1.4 trillion, which is a kind of a miracle, because the IMF were expecting us to go at around 1.645 trillion, but we are at 1.4 trillion. That's quite a miracle on its own. To get to that figure, you need to consider revenue rationalization, but also look at issues of expenditure. Then you are getting somewhere. When you have a deficit, it's not that you're not balancing the budget. I think it's very important for people to understand. Balancing the budget does not mean that what comes in comes out. No, it's about what are you doing with the deficit. If you look at all our ORTs, our revenue collection is going to meet about 90% of that, which means that the budget is giving us a room of just about 10% for us to go into investments and or development and or production. That's why we are saying no, we can't be a country which does not enter into mega farms. We can't be a country which does not enter into water provision, for example. So let's borrow for that, because that is investment. We are sure that we are going to pay back when we enter into mining. We're sure that we're going to pay back when we enter into those mega farms. So we're not borrowing for ORT. This is a very important thing for people to understand. We are not borrowing for ORT. We're not borrowing for salaries. No. We are borrowing for production.
In 2011, Malawi attempted to implement a zero-deficit budget, but it failed after the government was reported to resort to borrowing from local sources to finance the deficit.
The 2024 tobacco selling season started on a high note last week, with farmers going home smiling as buyers offered better prices for the leaf than last year. On the opening day at Chinkoma auction floors in Kasungu, berry tobacco attracted prices as high as $3 per kilogram on the usually troubled auction side of the market. Growers' representative body, the Tobacco Association of Malawi Trust, has since expressed optimism that output will be over 200 million kilograms next season if the prices remain elevated. The tobacco selling season opened last week with 3 markets of Chinkoma, Lilongwe and Limbe. Chimwemwe Mangazi reports.
Tobacco Association of Malawi President Abio Kalimabanda says the market has started on a positive note owing to increase in prices, which will attract more farmers to produce tobacco next season.
Yes, I'm impressed very well, because I've seen prices, good prices, what we have been looking for. So farmers are happy with these prices so far. We have been failing to meet the demand just because of prices. Because the prices will press farmers to go back to the field and work hard to produce more tobacco. You see this season. This season, I think we are expecting overproduction to produce because farmers are happy, and the farmers will migrate from other crops to join the tobacco production. So we represent them. That's why we have seen these prices, because of our recommendation. There are other prices which came 2 weeks ago, so we rejected it, and these are the prices which we are happy with. So we represent them. Today, so far, since the market is still on, we've seen the highest price of $3.11. The lowest was about $2.20.
His sentiments are echoed by Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Dixie Company.
The impression is very good. Actually, I think the trending from the time the president opened, this is consistent, and we're very happy as a ministry, and as government we think that the industry is progressing in the right direction.
Progressing when we are failing to meet the demand?
Well, meeting the demand is another thing, because it's an issue related to production, maybe because of climate shocks and other things, but we will try our best to see if we can increase, because now the reaction is going to be that most farmers seeing this, we want to produce more. So far they've received 2,904, I think, bills that are going for sale now, and the highest is about $3.20, which is very good, much better than the other years.
Figures provided by inside sources show that the country has realized $12.9 million after selling 5.1 million kilograms of tobacco at $2.53 per kilogram in the first week.
Well, on that note, we've also come to the end of today's edition of the program Business Time. This is a magazine program in which we image business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, my name is William Kumwembe. Always remember, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Stay safe. Thank you for watching.